On April 22nd, 1861, the Civil War broke out in the United States, splitting the country into two, the Union in the North and the Confederate in the South. These two sides fought each other, with each side having their own beliefs on slavery and how it should be handled. The North believed that slavery needed to be abolished, while the South believed that the slaves should stay due to their importance for the economy. How did these two sides get their armies for the battles, though? This is the question I will be answering today. Before the Civil War broke out in the US, America already had an army. This army wasn't very big, though. You see, the Founding Fathers feared that too big of an army could be taken advantage of, and so they believed that they needed to keep it small. This army had a mere 1,800 people, but that all changed as soon as the war began. When the war broke out, many people wanted to fight for what they believed should be done with the slaves. The armies quickly grew, with the Union having 26,000 people and the Confederate having 35,000 people. This amount proved not to be enough, as when the first battle of the Civil War broke out, the Union lost around 3,000 people and the Confederate lost around 1,700 people. These two sides needed to recruit more people, or else they would easily be beaten. But how could they get more recruitments? At the start of the war, Jefferson Davis became the leader of the Confederate side. With Jefferson now in power, the North decided that they too needed a leader, so they elected Abraham Lincoln. Jefferson became intimidated by Lincoln, so he started to recruit people into the militia of the Confederacy. Jefferson was able to attract over 75,000 people by putting flyers around the South, asking if people would join the army. This still proved not to be enough though, as they still needed more people. Jefferson had to find another way to recruit more people into the Confederate Army. Back in 1792, the U.S. made the Militia Act. This act stated that any white male over 18 could be taken to the army of their state if the government so needed to. This later changed in 1795 from white male over 18 to white males between 15 and 18. This was Jefferson's method to draft more soldiers. He recruited over 640,000 people over the rest of the Civil War. When soldiers came to the Confederate Army, they would go through a very brief medical exam. If they passed this medical exam, they would instantly begin training. If they failed, however, their talents would be used for something else for the war. Every day, the soldiers would train differently for what they needed to improve. The Union, on the other hand, got their soldiers in a different way. At the start of the war, the Union, also known as the Northern or Federal Army, had around 26,000 people. Abraham Lincoln was scared at the size of the Confederate Army and said that the North needed to get more men into the army. Abraham Lincoln told the local governments of towns to recruit people through the Militia Act of 1792. They recruited not only 100,000 or 500,000, not even a million, but over 2 million people over the rest of this war. The people that the North would draft for the war would go through a medical exam to see if they were healthy enough to fight. If they were healthy enough, they would get the uniforms and begin to do drills in preparation for the war. The Union used Hardee's infantry tactics to train. Hardee's infantry tactics went like this: wake up, do some drills, a practice fight, and finally a march back to camp. After a while, a tapping sound would be heard around camp, signaling lights out. The soldiers would eat typically 3 times a day, depending on how much food they had. A typical breakfast had coffee and bread. A typical lunch had fresh meat, when available, rice, beans, onions, and potatoes. A typical dinner was just the leftover food from lunch. Many soldiers came in and out of the Civil War during its 4-year-long run. Many people were recruited into the North and South during the war, and many soldiers died while fighting their hardest for their side of America. I hope this video helped you understand how the Civil War got its soldiers. Thank you for watching.